Hey, everyone. I am back. It's Rich Sheffrin, and good to see everyone. I see people are joining us right now, and that's exciting. And so I want to tell you about today what we're going to cover, and then some introductions, etc., and we'll get into it. So, what we're going to talk about today are two of my favorite thinking tools. These are things that we've started to cover, but haven't gone into the detail that I think would be useful for you. And so I'm doing these live streams every Tuesday and Thursday, Tuesdays at 2 p.m., Thursdays at 6 p.m. But tonight, what we're going to be covering are right here on this stream. What we're going to be covering are my favorite thinking tools. And if you've been on these live streams before, please comment in the chat and let me know that you've been here before and which topics you've liked most. And if this is your first time joining us, I'm excited to have you here and to share with you some of the tools that I've used to not only grow my own business, but those of my clients' businesses. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. And so, along those lines, let's kind of take a look at who we have joining us. And let me give a shout out. So, we have, whoops, let's move this around a little bit so that people can see. There we go. We've got Tim Cooper from the Gold Coast, Australia. Very cool. We've got Carlin in Arizona. We've got Christy. Hey, hey. It's that time again. Yes, it is Christy. And Christy is one of our most engaged in the Facebook group that we changed the name of, and I'll be telling you about that in a second. We've got Marcus in Honolulu, Hawaii. Shout out to Honolulu, Hawaii. Teresa tuning in from Mexico, New York. Is that part of New York? That's interesting. And I think we're talking tomorrow, aren't we, Teresa, if I'm remembering correctly? And I'll actually be in New York City tomorrow night when we talk. Milos has been on the last four live streams. Pretty cool, Milos. I appreciate you coming back again and again. And from Serbia. Sweet. It's so amazing how international Facebook is and how international, therefore, these Facebook Lives are. From Minnesota, I was at your July '07 seminar in Delray. I hope you were also at the one in Orlando in '08. That was probably our best one. But glad to see you again, Bob. And we've got Jack from California. We've got Aditya from Germany. So we've got lots of people, and more people are joining us, and we're talking about thinking tools, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not so much what you know, but it's how you think that's going to determine how successful you are in business. And quite often, what I find is that the entrepreneurs that spend time thinking are the ones that do the best. And I just finished yesterday, I believe, uh, Elon Musk's biography. I was kind of late to reading that. And what was really fascinating to me was just his raw intellectual power, right? How he took it upon himself to learn many things and how good of a thinker he has been. Now, it's also fascinating to me that if you've read lots of biographies of successful entrepreneurs, what you often find is that they often are in a not often but consistently in a lot of their stories, they have kind of walked the razor's edge where their business could have been complete kaput, self-destructed. The whole thing could have came tumbling down and left penniless, or that they got out of it. And both in Steve Jobs' case, both in Elon Musk's case, they were this close to losing it all. And obviously, they both didn't, but they came this close. And that should really give inspiration to any entrepreneur, of not only the truth of the matter that it is an uncertain path, but that willpower, that strength to be committed to something, to not give up, is such a incredibly important part of being an entrepreneur. And both in Steve Jobs' case, but it's very obvious in Elon Musk's case, is that he is committed to a cause much bigger than himself, something that we've talked about in the past. And that when you do commit to a cause bigger than yourself, it pulls you into greatness because it pulls you into a higher level of performance than you would ever perform if it was just about yourself. And so we look at great people and we tend to think that they are inherently great. And that's kind of a cop out in a way because it gives us the ability to let ourselves off the hook for not being like that, right? For being the way we wound up being. And what most people don't realize is that you can transform from the way you wound up being to who you would most like to be or to be better uh, simply by committing to a cause bigger than yourself. And for those of you who've studied like existential philosophy, like Sartre, primarily Sartre would probably be the best one to think of. He had something, but Alfred Adler, one of the three giants of psychology. You had Freud, Jung, and Adler. And Adler was actually the first president of the Psychoanalytic Institute. Then Jung took over, right? But Adler, and Sartre both had this concept of taking on a life task, taking on a task of life, and this cause bigger than yourself is often kind of parallels what Sartre talked about, what Adler spoke about, and what the best entrepreneurs in the world are committed to. And so I just share that with you because it is one of the most powerful ways to tap into a level of effectiveness, effort, and an ability that you can't if you don't tap into that, right? And in previous conversations, when we've spoken about that, one of the things that I have found is that oftentimes entrepreneurs can look at their childhood to find that bigger cause, either because of something they were completely fascinated by, or that they were robbed of and fought later on to kind of take on for themselves, but then also for others. So, some more people joining us here. So, let's take a look at who's on with us. We have Luis from Mexico. We have Francis from Hamburg, Germany. We have Damon from New Zealand. We have Amri from Round Rock, Texas. And so good to see you all, and so good to not be talking to myself. So, yep, we're talking about thinking tools. We're talking about why thinking is so important to the growth of your business, and that most people don't spend any time thinking. And let me kind of throw up on the screen here the new Facebook group. Whoop, that's right in my face. That's probably not the best place for it. Oh, and sorry about what happened in the last live stream. Let's see, I'll put it up here. What happened in the last live stream is that I'm playing around with all these different tools, and apparently some of it was sucking all the juice out of my computer. So I had like zero power left, even though my laptop is powered by my monitor. Tonight, though, I've got two power sources going into my laptop to make sure that we don't have the same incident as before. And so, yep, we changed the name of the Facebook. We changed it to the name of the company, which is Strategic Profits. And you can find us at that link right there. And I strongly recommend you join. I posted, and it's still there, this report that I wrote. It was a $97 report, and I've often been told that it was one of my best paid reports. And I'm giving it away free in the Facebook group. It's called The Hidden Obstacles to Success, and it was basically what I saw as the difference between the clients that I've helped add $15 billion worth of revenue to their businesses and the clients that I haven't. And what were those differences? And so it's a 100 or so page report. And one of the arguments I make in the report is that most people don't think well. They don't think often, and so this report was my attempt to change that by giving people tools to make their thinking more accurate, more optimal, and more often. And so tonight we're talking about two of the things or tools, you could say, that I've used in my life, in my business, in my clients' businesses, and that I talk about in the Hidden Obstacles report. So some more people joining us. So let's see. We've got Yadira from Mexico. We've got Linda from Kauai, Hawaii. We've got Carl from Italy. We've got Noah from Los Angeles. We've got Mona, I guess. Oh, no, Mohammed from Mona. And oh, thank you, Carlos. I appreciate you saying that. It was amazing. Cool. I appreciate that too. So, yep. So that's the Facebook group. I strongly recommend you join. There's no cost. We don't even ask you to opt in, and you can get that free report there. In addition, I add stuff from time to time, and we'll probably be adding some things related to what we're going to be talking about today. So, the first one that I want to really talk about are sentence stems. And I'm curious how many of you are familiar with sentence stems. If you can let me know if one, yes or no, and do you use them? And I would imagine that there's more of you who are familiar with them than have used them, but entertain me here for a second and let me know if you've ever really engaged them in a way that would help you grow your business. Monster. I love this is my favorite monster drink. Um, Ultra Sunrise. That's what it's called. Probably shouldn't be drinking it this late at night, but say la vie. Um, Bob said he's reading the Hidden Obstacles to Success. I was really stuck, and this has helped greatly. What benefit do we get from self-defeating behaviors? Hmm. Well, there's a lot, right? And there's a lot to that, and we can certainly get into that, and I will talk about that. Um, the but there's always a payoff to every activity, and just to talk about that for a second, and then we'll get back to sentence stems. But uh, is it Denise or yeah, Denise says I'm using them now. Eye opening. I think they're incredibly eye opening, and I want to tell you more about it. Uh, I said quite a bit about it in Hidden Obstacles, but I want to give you some of my own sentence stems and things that you can think about. But Alfred Adler, who's someone who I mentioned earlier, which was really one of the three giants of psychology, who for some reason got shortchanged by history, probably because he didn't write any books. He did a lot of lectures, and you can read of some of those lectures, but he was not prolific like Freud and Jung, and a maybe that tells us something about the if you want to build a personal brand, maybe it helps to be prolific. I would certainly imagine it would be, because Adler was right up there with Jung and Freud, but he had a very different perspective on why we do what it is we do. And I'm gonna look it up here because I just always forget which one is and which one the other one is. One is teleological, one is ideological, and I forget which is which. Okay, so okay, so um, Adler is teleological, right? Teleological, teleological. And Freud and Jung are ideological. Let me just make sure that's right. Yep. Okay. So what does that mean? Well, ideological means back to cause, right? So we behave a certain way today, right now, because of what's happened in our past. And Adler thought that that can't necessarily be the whole story because things happen in the past for the same events could happen for people, and yet their futures are very different, right? And so it can't just be about the past. And so along those lines, he gave it some thought, and he had a very different perspective, and I find it fascinating. He said, so that's ideological, right? That it comes like our current behavior is caused by our past events. He had a very different thought, right? And that is that our current behavior is caused by our future goals. And that's really interesting to me. So, I have had a very interesting relationship with my father, who's no longer with me. But if you asked me about my father, I would have some negative things to say about him. Not publicly, not here, but I would. And so, Freud and Jung's perspective on that would be, well, he did some horrible things to you in the past. And that, therefore, could be the cause of why you have these negative emotions as it relates to your father. However, Adler would say there's a future payoff to having bad thoughts about your dad, that you could have good thoughts or you could have bad thoughts. And so having bad thoughts about your dad serves you in some future way. Maybe it's that you don't want your success compared to his success. Maybe you don't think you'll be as successful as him. So it's very convenient for you to have a list of bad things about him because you don't have those bad things, and therefore that's a reason why you come up with the negatives first. Because, of course, he did some nice things to me, he did some horrible things to me, but why am I looking at the negative? It's the same reason why, certain behaviors can be very endearing to us when we're falling in love with someone. And then when we're falling out of love with that person, those same very behaviors are now reasons to eject, right? That, the way it's not the behavior that changed, it's our future goal. And our future goal, like in that situation, one, loving the person, right? One, not wanting to be in love with that person anymore, changes how we see that that behavior. So when someone is self-sabotaging, it could be a lot of reasons, and it could be some past based, it could be some future based, but this is not really related to the reticular activating system because someone just uh, brought that up here. But what it is like, if you're self sabotaging, it could be, right, that you are concerned that you wouldn't achieve success if you worked really hard. So by avoiding the work, you've now built in an excuse, right? That could be one. Another one could be that um, you haven't really figured out what it is you truly want, and therefore are sabotaging yourself to avoid the heavy lifting of the work because you're not so sure that that's what you truly want. And when you start going further down the path, you start to close off other options of other things that you can do. Because anytime you say yes to one thing, you have to say no to many other things. And because of that, that could be a reason. There could be 100 different reasons, right? The question though is what is your reason? And one of the things that I found to be probably the most helpful when it comes to specific self-sabotage and why are we doing those things, and it's not for the faint of heart, so I can give you a warning about that ahead of time, is and I just want to make sure I get the title right. I think it's Invisible Commitments is the name of the book. So uh, this is right to you, Bob. Um, Visible Commitments, if that's the name of the book. I think that's it. Let me. Where's Jamie, who could pull stuff up for me? If I was Joe Rogan, that's what would happen. Nope, it's not called Invisible Commitments. So let me uh, look for the author. Um, let's see. All right. Oh, Immunity to Change. That's the name of the book. So Robert Kagan is a very well-known professor at Harvard University. He's one of the world's experts on adult education, and not adult education that you might think of what is adult education, but adult education from a standpoint of transformation, about actually shifting people's perspectives and worldviews. And so this book, Immunity to Change, is what it's a series of steps, and maybe I can even find it. I could pull it up on the screen and we can actually look at that. So let me see if I can while we're talking. Let's see. And then we'll get into the sentence stems because that's really where I want to spend some time. Let's see today. Oh, I do have something related, so that's cool. Very cool. All right, so hopefully, let's see if. All right. Um, I know it's boring when. All right. Let's see. Nope, that's not it. All right. Let's see. Um, Let me do a search. All right, so let's talk about sentence stems, though. Now, why are they effective? Well, they're effective for many reasons, but let me give you a few. It's the consistency, especially when done daily, that kind of keep it at the forefront of your mind. So for Milos, who said reticular activating system, yes, one of the reasons why sentence stems are powerful is because it's keeping in front of your mind what you're trying to figure out, get answers for, work out, etc. So that's certainly one of them. Another one is that by priming yourself on a daily basis to find answers for a sentence, right? What you're doing is also giving your subconscious some time to actually have that answer, right, kind of come to the surface. So especially when you're doing them relatively frequently, what will often happen is at some point during the process, you might have an epiphany outside of doing the sentence stems. All right, that's not it either. All right, so I'm just going to look one other place and let's see. All right, so anyway, let's get to sentence stems. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit all over the place today, maybe a little bit too much ADD for the day. But yeah, let's kind of dive into what I want to show you. I'm going to show you some stuff from first the um, I'm going to show you first something related to sentence stems from my, let's see, I got to move this out of the way, from my Evernote. So this is, yeah, let's go here. Cool. And why is this here? That's interesting. All right, let's go to this and see, hopefully. There we go. Very cool. All right. So hopefully you can see this. And I'm going to get rid of the overlay right now about joining our Facebook group. And I'm also going to get rid of our logo so that you have a better chance of seeing this. Okay, so as you can see, what you're seeing here is a Evernote note about sentence stems. I just pulled it from the Hidden Obstacle report. And the one of the things that's interesting is that Nathaniel Branden, the gentleman who wrote a lot about self-esteem, was a protege of Ayn Rand, or Ayn Rand, if you want to pronounce it correctly. And Nathaniel Branden has written a lot about sentence stems. In fact, um, he has on his website two 26-week uh, programs, you could say, of like 5 or 6 sentence stems a week, doing each one, coming up with 6 to 10 answers each week, each one each week. And if I can pull that up here, let's see if I saved it. I don't think I did, unfortunately, but you can do a search for it um, and you will find them. But I would not necessarily recommend that you do that, and it's one of the reasons why I didn't save it, because I find that sentence stems are even more valuable when you develop your own. Because when you develop your own, you're actually, one, thinking about what it is that if you spent more time thinking on, you would actually benefit from. And two, you can actually do it for the growth of your business. And so we're going to look at that. So yes, all of this, all these Facebook Lives, one of the reasons I'm doing them is to connect more with everyone out there and to give my experience to you, what I've learned over the years, so that it can help you grow your business. It can help you be more effective. And the way that Facebook looks at uh, what what it should show people who are already, the 80,000 fans of my Facebook page or the 3,000 or so people currently in uh, our strategic profits group is based on the engagement that I have with you. So that means that the more you share this, the more that you give a thumbs up, the more that you comment, the better Facebook sees this as something valuable that other people would like. And you can't do that too much. It's impossible. So I just appreciate anything that you can do along those levels as a way of paying me back for spending the time to help you. So as you can see here, like here's a few sentence stems that I have done and gotten a lot of value out of. I'd be more productive today if dot dot dot. And the idea is that you write down 6 to 10 answers as quickly as possible each day. At the end of the week, you'll have somewhere between 40 and 70 answers, right? Now you can reflect back on that. And by reflecting back on all your answers, right? Because each day you're kind of starting from a clean slate, you can see if any of those answers are valuable enough for you to actually take a lot further, right? To actually incorporate into not just a day, but into your life. In addition to that, just even the act of writing every morning how you could be more productive will make you more conscious of being productive. Back to Milos's point about the reticular activating system, right? And for those of you who don't know, like the reticular activating system, what that's all about, your brain is processing a ridiculous amount of input every given second, so much more than you're consciously aware of. And that's why, you could be in a room full of conversations, right? And all you're hearing is a murmur. But then one person in one of those conversations mentions your name and you can immediately hear it, right? You immediately zone in on that. Well, in order for you to recognize that your name was being said, some part of your brain was processing all of the input. And when it found something important to you, it moved your attention there. That's an example of the reticular activating system. Another example is you are thinking about buying a specific car and then all of a sudden you notice it everywhere, or you buy that car and you notice it everywhere. A woman who's trying to get pregnant might notice pregnant women all of a sudden a lot more. Because anytime that we tell our brain something is important to us, our brain will help us spot that out in the world. And so, you know, being more productive, letting your brain know that that's important to you by filling out a sentence stem like, I'd be more productive today if I, gives your brain something to latch onto and to look for, right? I could conquer procrastination by, that's another one, right? Or eating healthier would be easier if I, right? And those kind of answers would probably come down to either commitment, to changing your environment, to having certain conversations, what have you. So I'd love to know from you guys, for anyone who's already doing sentence stems, what sentence stems are you currently using? I think that would be really interesting, and other people might benefit from seeing what the sentence stem that you're using. Okay, I'm just scrolling through here. What's in the report? Yep. The rules are write as quickly as possible. Right. The first thing that comes to mind, you do not edit. This is for your consumption only. Uh, so Denise, when you say procrastination, like what's the exact sentence? Is it procrastination? I would eliminate procrastination completely if I, or procrastination would be something I don't struggle with if I, what is the actual sentence that you're using there? The goal also is not to look at what you wrote the day before the next day. Ideally, you should do this exercise in the morning for at least 7 days, or for maximum results, 14 days. For that sentence stem, and you can do more than one at a time. I would stop procrastinating if. Um, hmm. That's not bad, and I might have even been one of my earlier ones. Let's see, but I don't like if is almost. I would add an I after if, like if I something, because what I find is that if you leave it kind of the way you are, you might come up with a bunch of answers that are much more dependent on resources than being resourceful. And the best entrepreneurs are always resourceful, not dependent on resources. Okay, so let's see. For those of you who aren't, so here's, I gave another example here, and then I'd love for you guys to think about a sentence stem that you think would make a difference in your personal performance. So I guess when I was writing this report over a decade ago, I had some important presentation that was about a month away, but I was probably procrastinating on it. And so here were some initial answers. It would be easy to work on my presentation if. So you see, like instead of saying I would stop avoiding my presentation if I'm not, that's not really, I might not get the best answers. And, if I'm going to do this for a few minutes every day, I want to make sure that I am doing it in a way that really pulls out the best for me. So in this particular example, right, it would be easy to work on my presentation if I didn't watch any TV until I had worked on it for at least an hour. If I had started with the section that was easiest for me. If I laid out everything I needed to work on the night before. If I did free writing exercises, pretending I was doing the presentation and writing the transcript. If I doodled and diagrammed the presentation in my journal, if I called a friend, recorded the conversation, and we talked about what I wanted to present on, if I created an outline of the presentation, if I assembled the images and I wanted to use in my slides, if I opened PowerPoint and simply started, if I gave an impromptu presentation alone with Dragon Naturally Speaking to transcribe it, and so on. And when I was doing that, like I might pull one for that day and actually use it, not and I'll still do it the next day and the next day and the next day. But the goal is not only to do this as a mental exercise, but to also actually spur whatever behavior or whatever change or whatever insight that you want to bring into effect. And then for fun, I just shared here, as you can see, if I can do this, let's see. Gonna make this a little bit bigger. See if I can. Let's see. This, no, can't make it bigger, I guess, because I copied and pasted it from the report. But these are actual notes from my journal. Whoops. Where you can see that I had 4 different sentence stems that I was working on at that moment. Right. So I love it. We got a bunch of people on right now. Why don't you just come up with a sentence stem right now? You don't have to necessarily use it tomorrow or tonight, but if you did, for your benefit, for the benefit of everyone else, come up with a sentence stem right now that you believe that would be beneficial if you had a bunch of answers to, as it relates to your own performance. And don't be shy. There's no one's going to judge you. And if you have a good one, other people will benefit from it. And if it's not good, we'll help you improve it. Okay. So Jack's got a good one. Jack's got, I can implement my ideas right away and answers to that would come up by not by not ending the idea thought until I've wrote down at least one step for completion. If I, by immediately sending an email to myself with next steps, or immediately adding a task to my to-do list on what the next step is, to that might be some of the answers that come up from that, right? The the Jack, like it depends on how many ideas you get, but you could, if you get lots of ideas, then this might be overburdensome, right? So I can make sure I implement my best ideas by, right? And then that might give you some other different ways to kind of skin it. Or I can ensure that I operate with speed when it comes to my ideas. Well, I don't think it's the best. Play with it, but I do like it. I think it's a good. I think it's a good question. I think that as you get answers to it, You might alter the sentence stem a little bit, but because I think that you don't want to implement all ideas, but you certainly want to implement ideas that are worthy of implementation. And so that would be very useful. Linda says selling would be easier if, yeah, that's a good one. Uh, but once again, like that could open up to, I could make selling, I could be more effective selling, right? I would find selling easier if you don't want there to be you don't even want the idea that you need more resources to be more resourceful. So I could make selling easier I would make selling easier if right? You want to make sure that it's more first person if you can. Um, all right. I I will exercise more if put out my clothes to exercise. If I make a deal that I'm going to get on the exercise machine or start the habit no matter what. So that's not a bad sentence to start with. And let's see another one here. I would take more of the right actions if I gave myself a reward after X number. Um, if I was clear on what the right actions were. So I like that one, Ulrich. And I think I fritzed out last time on your question. It had nothing to do with you. It had to do with the battery. So I thank you for joining me again, Ulrich. And I like that. And I think that over time you also get better at doing sentence stems. So my assumption, Ulrich, is that you know what the right actions are, but you don't always take as many of them as you can. And if that's the case, then this would be a great question. I know the answer to Matt Rizvi's uh, sentence stem. I feel amazing. I will feel amazing by 5 p.m. if I could ever get Rich to call me back, if I could get Rich to complete what he said he was going to do before 5 p.m. Tonight, I have to actually shoot a video that I told him I'd get him by the end of the day, but that's perfect, Matt. Um, I can find my dream clients easily by, yes, exactly. I love that. That's great, Marcus. Um, I can create a new income source if perfect, or I can, we'll come back to that, but I do like that, Ulrich. Um, is there an ideal number of sentence stems you create per day? Because the more stems you create, the more answers you would generate, and the and that might create information overload. Just a thought. Well, it depends. Yeah, you can certainly do too many of them, but I wouldn't but it depends on what your outcome is. Because it's also a creative exercise, right? If you wanted to go further and not do 6 to 10, but possibly do 20, now you're kind of exercising the creative muscle. And generally, it's the last third where you come up with the most crazy, but also sometimes the best ideas. But yeah, I generally work on one issue at a time, and I'll take different sentences to kind of aim at different parts of it. So if I want my business to improve, I'm going to ask questions that relate to selling more, maybe growing my list, right? But they're all in the same ballpark for me. I find that that's useful. And then the next period of time, I'll do some personal thing. But I do think that you bring up a good question. There is no ideal though, and it really just depends on what your outcome is. I could implement a marketing strategy for our olive oil company if um, let's see. I think let's see. I could implement a marketing strategy for our olive if well, I would say I would tweak that, Christy. I would say I could increase the number of marketing strategies I implement by I could implement marketing strategies faster by, something more where you're kind of looking for answers to be able to do more, do it faster, or something like that. But I'm not, everyone knows their specific um, situation best. So if it fits, it fits. And if you get good answers, that's the most important thing. Ulrich, a man after my own heart. If I could become a more strategic entrepreneur, perfect, right? Um, I could build my brand in English speaking markets if I dig it, Milos. I would be more productive if perfect. Um, I can get more leverage from my time if I dig that one. Totally dig that one. Uh, Cool, Ulrich. Glad. Um, let's see. I'd encourage you to look up T.J. Robinson, the olive oil hunter. Gary Bencivenga, the legendary copywriter, wrote the sales letter. Oh, that's true. Great insight, Marcus. And that's specifically to you, Christy. I never even thought of that. Yes, Christy. Um, it's Gary Bencivenga is one of the best copywriters in the world. And as a labor of love, I don't even know if he owns a piece of that company or he just loves that company. But yes, if you type in Gary Bencivenga and olive oil, you should find some stuff. If you don't, Christy, we will post it to the Facebook group, and someone will be able to locate it for you. That is such a good idea, Marcus. You are on the ball. Um, Sully, it would be much easier to take action more if yeah. So that's pretty good. So you guys get it. All right, let's uh, let's get to now some business ways of um, let's see. Nope, this is not the business way. So let me go here. No, wrong. To here. Yeah, there we go. So here are some that I just wrote up before going live tonight. You guys notice I actually have backlights this time, and I was playing around with that. I can actually let's see, we can make them like more pink and more like neon green, um, and I still want to get better. I still want to get better sounds, but I did put a large crowd applause. So here, uh, also write stems that prompt you to turn abstract ideas into concrete behaviors. The habit that I most want to change right now is one project that I've always wanted to complete is the very next action I can take to achieve my goal is, and actually these I didn't write. I was looking at a website and I copied and pasted them in there. Don't remember what website, but those are not mine. Here are some that I came up with as I was kind of thinking about how could anyone, an entrepreneur, actually grow their online business by doing sentence stems outside of working on their own productivity, right? So let's see. How do I zoom this in a little bit? Oh, I get. Can you guys see it? I think you guys can, right? Let's see. I could probably zoom in a little bit more. See if I can. There we go. There we go. Okay, so number one element customers buy on in my market. In other words, like the number one value point that gets customers to buy in my market is, right? And by pressing yourself each day to come up with it, you might come up with different answers that you never thought of before. The most certain way for me to grow the business is, right? And now you're just trying to come up with answers every day. The project that would grow my business the most is, right? The number one activity that if I did daily would grow my business the most is the real value I provide my customers is the product that my market would buy the most of is a segment my business serves is the one area I waste the most time in is the fastest way to grow my business is right. So once again, these are just ideas, right? Where we're starting a sentence. The idea is that we want to end that sentence, and we want to end that sentence in a way that completes the sentence, but gives us a complete thought that answers really the beginning of the sentence stem. So, it. I promise you, though, if you do this daily, it will make a difference. And I'm thinking about I wonder how many of you guys keep a journal, one. And then two, if you do, it occurred to me that I've been really working on my sleep lately. And one of the things that, sleep experts say is to spend the last couple hours away from the computer or away from any screens. And I've been thinking a lot about that. And I have blue glasses, like they're called Blue Block something, I don't remember, uh, recommended by some biohacker. And it occurred to me that I actually should switch when I write in my journal to the evening because then I could even spend more than the 45 minutes or an hour on it. I could plan out the next day. And since I write in my journal by hand, it would actually give me an hour before I, an hour before bed of not being on, not being on any technology. Plus, it would also prime my brain to use my subconscious better when I'm sleeping, right? So that's something that I'm probably going to experiment with. And we had this conversation, I think it was last week or last Facebook Live, where we were talking about, the lean development process and how looking at startups as an experiment. And part of biohacking is also looking at your life, right? Me looking at my life as an experiment. And so there's, a saying about that called N equals one, right? The set is one, you. And so constantly kind of using yourself as an experiment is kind of a cool way to be more engaged with life, uh, to kind of be curious about getting more out of yourself, and that's why I love that kind of stuff, right? It makes every day more exciting. So whether it's wearing an Oura ring, right, or an Apple Watch, or I test my ketones and glucose in the morning. I have a blood pressure cuff because my blood pressure is known to sometimes go high. But all these things then become kind of a way of tracking myself, what works best for me, what doesn't, right? So, maybe these sentence stems will work great for you. Maybe they won't. What's important is that you try them, and that's the only way that you can really kind of get at it. I had a great conversation today with a friend of mine, someone I respect, James Von Elswick. He's one of the best media buyers when it comes to native and also just a shrewd entrepreneur. And he was talking about how he learned a lot over the quarantine because he spent most of the quarantine holed up by himself in Miami. He generally lives in France. And so we were talking about that. And he was talking about how he's getting better and better at one, spotting patterns, pattern recognition, and two, being more proactive in using them, leveraging them, excuse me. So I was asking him lots of questions about that. And, so we were having a conversation and he was telling me about how did the conversation start? I'm not even sure how the conversation started. We were talking about testing of some sort. And then he said something that reminded me of something that I had learned from Mark Ford or Michael Masterson. And that was, Mark told me years ago that he never had something that started out shitty or mediocre turn into a home run. And that, Agora is in the home run business, the hits business, just like that was the end of what Mark was saying. And I could incorporate that because I was in the music business and I was in the fashion business, and those are both hit businesses. In other words, something tells you very quickly early on whether it's a hit or whether it's not. Now, that doesn't mean that you abandon everything until you find a hit, but if you're in a place where you are often more likely to spot a hit, right? That you're not going to do a split test that's automatically going, it's not as likely to split test your way to greatness as it is to potentially have 10 different offers coming out. Now, a lot of people can't throw offer after offer after offer out, so you have to kind of manage both of those kind of together. And one way to do that is to come up with different leads and test them as opposed to full offers so that you can kind of get a sense of which one should you be spending your time on. And that reminds me of the mental model we were talking about as far as little bets, right? The idea that uh, the way greatness is often occurred is by making small advances over time, but small advances consistently, right? Like Chris Rock not going into his basement to write a comedy special, but going out in the field, testing a little material, seeing what resonates, then going back and tweaking it, then taking that plus something else, going out in the field, tweaking it. And this idea of little bets being what allows you to build towards greatness, right? So by testing different leads, you kind of are making that first bet, and it gives you an opportunity to pivot way earlier than creating a whole piece of copy. And for those of you who don't know what a lead is a something that we talk about at Agora quite a bit. And for lack of a better way of describing it, it's generally the first 20% of the sales letter. It incorporates the pre-head, the headline, and the first couple of paragraphs that really set up the tone, the emotion, and determines whether you've caught the reader's attention and got them interested to to read on or to watch on, right? And so James was telling me that that connected with him to someone else who I don't want to mention the name because I don't know if I should or not, who is one of the biggest advertisers online that he's friendly with, who tests like completely different creatives and will spend a grand here, a grand here, a grand, like 50 different creatives before going with something. Um, Obviously, this person's successful and can easily afford to do that, but that now becomes a pattern that he then will look to deploy in other areas. And that reminded me of two things that I wanted to share. One was Stephen Pierce, my very first internet marketing mentor. He was insanely good at pattern recognition. That's why he came up with something called Smart Pages, which back in the black hat SEO days we used a lot of. And then that's why he got into financial trading as well, because it's a lot of about spotting patterns. But spotting patterns is a way to the ability to spot patterns is a super advantage and is something that when you can spot a pattern that works and move it to work on your behalf, that gives you great power in being able to produce optimal results. Which reminds me of something I forgot to tell James, but I might have mentioned it on one of these Facebook Lives, but I don't think I have. So I think I have the longest standing business friendship with Jay Abraham. Been friends for over 2 decades and business partners on and off. And so I've gotten to see Jay evolve quite a few times, as Jay has seen me evolve numerous times. And our relationship, like any long relationship, goes up and down, not as far as positive, negative, but how much time we spend with one another, how often we talk to each other, etc. And there's two funny Jay things, but the second one is the one I wanted to get to. The first one though is that I used to, for a while, be Jay's arguing partner, and he would call me every morning, his morning, my later morning. He'd have a cup of coffee, and he'd want to argue about something to get his brain to work. So we'd pick a topic, and then we'd have an argument about it, and it wasn't really about what we were talking about, but it was a way for him to get his brain clocking. And I thought that was always fascinating and just a very kind of interesting way to get your brain kind of clocking early in the morning. But that's not why. But that's not the thing I wanted to bring up. The thing I wanted to bring up was I don't know if Jay still has this habit, although he seems to kind of like in the last couple of conversations it's come up at least once. But Jay spends a lot of time on the phone, and one of the things that he consistently used to do was that he'd start every phone call with a question. And the question was, what's working now for you? And if you think about it, it was such a great question, right? If you speak to 20 to 30 marketers or entrepreneurs on a daily basis and you start each one by what's working for you right now, by the time you're done with the day, you've collected a lot of great information, right? Like what's working best for you right now. And it's not a bad question to be asking. So let me go back here for a second. And let's go back to the chat here and would love to interact with you guys a little bit more. So let's see what we got going on. Can you share a sentence stem with a business partner or colleague and then compare your answers? Can the concept be used in this way? I don't see why not. You could also have a contest to see who can come up with more answers, who can come up with better answers, make it a contest. And Marcus agrees. He thinks that's a super cool idea. And Ulrich says he can read it. Great way to reflect on your day. Yes, by doing it at the end of the day. Oh, I watched his live feed today. I didn't realize he did a live feed today. Cool. Where did he do the live feed, Billy? I'd love to know. Is he doing them on Facebook, or is he doing them on Twitter, or is he doing them on YouTube? Like, where is he doing those? Shout out to Jay. Woot woot. We can play the air horn for Jay. I was just looking for an excuse to do that. I can implement journaling daily to develop and to train my mind and my senses be more open in touch with my life's activities. Yeah, that Matthew. I don't know if it's an ADD thing. I don't know if I'm just weird. But for me, one, if I didn't journal, I don't know that I'd spend any time thinking. But aside from that, also, I just find that it's very easy for me to go on autopilot, and not like a drone or something like that, but on autopilot where like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks could kind of like disappear, and I've really not done anything. And I find that keeping a journal kind of prevents that from happening. And so it keeps me much more in touch with myself, with what's going on in my life, and it also, while not it was never the reason for me to start, it is really cool for because I've been able to spot bigger patterns in my life, like cycles of what I've done. Right now that I've been keeping a journal for almost 30 years now, and then also like having the journal entries, like when my first daughter was born, when my second daughter was born, etc. So that, when I started my first business, when I started my second business, um, when I almost lost everything, when I was getting coached by a specific person and they said something meaningful to me, etc. So it's just, I love it. I love that I have it. What I find is that the hardest thing is often to start. And I find that for me personally, most things in my life are that way. And there's an ADD way of describing that. It's called task initiation. And I have difficulty with task initiation. I think that's more common than just an ADD thing. I think a lot of people do. Because, and what I mean by that, though, is like the problem is in the starting. Because it's like it's very easy for me to work out once I start. But getting myself to start is often difficult. And I was having this conversation with Katrina Ruth, and she was talking about how she creates content. And a lot of times she doesn't start. She doesn't feel like starting, but as soon as she starts, it gets a lot easier. And it's funny because I had never thought about that as it relates to creating content, but it definitely is the case in writing in my journal. Some of the best journal entries and some of the longest journal entries that I've ever written have started by saying, I don't really feel like writing. I don't even feel like I have much to say. And then lo and behold, like as I'm writing, something comes up and then it's like, blah, right? And so, you can't really, you can't, you don't, for me, I don't feel motivated to do something until I've started it. And so I can't use my feelings as a reason not to start. And that doesn't mean avoid all feelings, but the feeling of not wanting to do something is not a valid reason for me because I've just learned over time that I never feel like doing something until I've started. All right, let's see what we got here. Oh, so Billy said on Facebook. Cool. I'm gonna have to tell. I'm gonna call him later tonight because he's 3 hours earlier, and I'm gonna find out when and how often he's doing them. So Ulrich, let's see if we can make this a little bigger. Or actually, I can just read it. I went through a Eugene Schwartz training, and it seems he went through a massive amount of raw material, top grossing movies, gossip magazines, conversations. He engaged with everything and seemed to draw from that to test new assumptions or structures and new arguments. Yes, totally. And then the question is, how good is your input, right? How what's your rate of input as far as speed? And also, this is might be unique to me, it might not. But for me, I find that the faster I go through something, the more likely it is to hold my attention. So if I'm listening to something at regular speed, because I used to use, like, I've listened to high speed audio for, geez, I'm going to stand up for a few minutes here. I've been listening to high speed audio for over 20 years. I used to have a variable pitch, variable speed tape recorder that you could buy at Radio Shack. So even pre-internet days, right? Pre digital days. This feels loose. And I found that when someone's going at regular speed, it's too easy for me to get distracted by so many other things. But when at 200%, I now have to pay more close attention because I might miss something. At 300%, I can't really do anything else but listen. And so I like to listen at a speed that requires me to be totally focused. Unfortunately, I've done that for so long that I tend to be not the most polite conversation partner because people talk at 100%, and I'm used to listening at 300 to 400%, and so that causes some challenges for me. I do the same with video, and in the old days that was almost impossible. Nowadays it's relatively easy, and I do that with reading as well. And I just find that the input speed dictates my level of focus, and my level of focus determines how much I get out of something. And so, even though it might seem counterintuitive, the faster I go, the more I focus. The more I focus, the more I get it. And so, for me, there's a very strong correlation between the speed of input and the retention of input, and also the ability to work with it. So I don't know if that helps. I know you weren't. You were just making a comment about Eugene Schwartz. Although what I would say is that um, I don't. I'm not. I don't discount what Eugene Schwartz said, and I will never be a copywriter on the level of him, nor am I even a copywriter. But I am less, and I probably should be more. I'm less interested in what the world is interested in, even though I probably shouldn't be. I probably should be as a marketer. It would probably help me quite a bit. I go down different tangents. Like, for example, today I started reading Richard. I don't know that I'll stick with it for the whole thing because it's thousands and thousands of pages. But based on Elon Musk's first principles of physics and my thought that I don't really know that much about physics, I started reading this today on the elliptical, Richard Feynman's lectures that he did at Caltech, because that seemed interesting to me. So I'm always like, whatever I read then leads to the next thing that leads to the next thing. Um, yeah, that's how I know about Adler. That's how I know about all these things. Um, I'd rather know about the classical liberal arts, humanities, etc., than Lethal Weapon 1, 2, and 3 and stuff like that. Although, probably better to understand what makes Lethal Weapon 1, 2, and 3 work, much more valuable from a marketing perspective than a lot of the humanities stuff. All right, Milos. Wait, why isn't it going up? There we go. Hey, Rich, thank you again for these live events. can you talk? They're really full of gold nuggets. Can you talk about how and when and why did you decide to move away from your hypnosis practice? I'm moving from psychotherapy to marketing consulting, and I'm curious about your experience. Sure. Um, so a bunch of reasons, Milos. First, what I was trying to do was I was trying to take over a cottage industry. That's the way I looked at it, right? That there were all these like mom and pop hypnotists, but there was no hypnosis business. And so I could come in and therefore disrupt and also be able to do things that normal individual hypnotists couldn't do. And that worked, right? So, um, so a normal hypnotist would never have full page ads running in any newspaper, in Manhattan, whereas I could, and I could have them every day. The A normal hypnotist wouldn't have a phone, not a phone room like a high pitched phone room, but their own call center, their own all these kinds of things. I could. So I tracked down Cy Sperling. He the older I get, the less people will probably know who he is. But Cy Sperling was the owner of the Hair Club for Men. He's the first. He took over cottage industry because before there were, and I don't even know what they did. I think they did like kind of plugs or whatever, or some kind of toupee or something, right? But it used to be there was no big companies in that. And so he was the first, just like I was kind of the first for hypnosis. Not that there weren't other people in other parts of the country doing it, but I'm talking about, New York, the tri-state area. And and so one of the things though that was very clear to me was that once Cy did the treatment, he got like a $500 annuity every year because you had to come back. So even when times were slow, he could do the first treatment for free, take a $20 or $50 loss on that, but then have a $500 annuity for the next 20 years, which also meant the longer he was in business, the more he was going to make. That was not the case in the hypnosis business. In fact, we were often the place of last resort for most people. So not only, were we not getting an ongoing revenue stream or a back end, but we were also not getting as many referrals that you would think we would get based on our success because most people weren't sharing that they were getting hypnotized. So that was another reason. But I would say that the two biggest reasons, and I don't, they both were weighed heavily on me. So the first one is that weight loss was the biggest part of our business, and and generally the people that came in for weight loss were, for the most part, morbidly obese, and we got people great results. But great results in weight loss could be 10% success rate because when Consumer Reports at that time did a study of like what were the most effective weight loss strategies, programs, etc., they said Weight Watchers which had a 5% success rate. I thought we were higher. I thought we were around 10%. We weren't in Consumer Reports. We weren't a national kind of thing. But so a 10% success rate. The the challenge though with hypnosis as opposed to Weight Watchers is if you go to Weight Watchers and you eat a tub of ice cream in the middle of the night, you don't blame Weight Watchers. You say, I wasn't able to stick to the diet. When you pay for hypnosis treatments and you eat a tub of ice cream at the end of the night, um, you might blame hypnosis. And I didn't like that. But we did have a lot of success. So, but what occurred to me is that if you took, and we were on our way to do 13.5 million in 2001. If you took all the weight loss clients, which would have been, I don't know, 10,000, we didn't have 50,000. I'm just trying to do the math, but tens of thousands. And you put them all in a room and you told me that, they were going to spend an hour or two talking to one another, there would definitely be quite a few success stories, but there'd be more non-success stories. If you told me I had to go into that room, I would be scared shitless to go into that room. And so that right then and there, when I realized that, I knew I wanted to get out of the business because I didn't want to have a business where I was afraid of my customers. And in fact, you know, one of the, yeah, like some of the stuff that I'm about to say might sound very egotistical and self-important, self-aggrandizing, but I just think it to be the case, and I don't know if it is. But a lot of the ways like group coaching is done and stuff like that, you know, it either came from me or it came from someone like Jay Abraham or Dan Kennedy prior to me, right? So when I created my coaching program, I was the first business coach online. And, before there were modules and all that kind of stuff, like I would create PowerPoints and send people PowerPoints, and then we would go through the PowerPoints on the phone. And I did Q&A calls every week for all my customers. And that didn't matter if it was in 2004 when I first started with, coaching people, and I had 25 clients, or in 2007 when I had 2,000 clients. All my clients could be on that Q&A call and anyone could ask me a question. And for me, that was my attempt at recreating that room that I had to step into every week. So that's how much I did not like what I had kind of created for myself in the hypnosis world. The last reason, though, and probably the reason why then, was that 9/11 happened. And when 9/11 happened, FEMA took our phone lines, and then I took out SBA loans at a very um, discounted interest rate, and made some stupid decisions that I thought were the right decisions at the time. But I didn't have the business experience I have now, and in fact, I had never had any losses ever in business up until that time. Um, and so I was left with a decision that I either was going to have to pull all the way back and start back at like ground zero, right? Like, and I don't mean ground zero like 9/11 ground zero. I mean square one, right? I was going to have to let go of all the great talented people I had picked up over the years. I was going to have to get rid of the extra locations. I was going to have to start over again. And just doing anything a second time to me is kind of unappealing. But then to do it, having already done it and done it well, like that to me seemed not so great. Then with the idea that I'm going to restart a business that has me afraid to walk into a room where they all gathered and also has no back end, I was like, you know what? It's time to leave this business. And so there were parts of the business I really liked, but in the end, those reasons were the reasons I left. I know that's probably a long-winded answer, so I hope there was value for everyone who did not ask that question. But that's why I left the hypnosis business. The other reason, though, that I'll share and why I got online really was that I had learned how to write copy at that time and create marketing campaigns. It was during my hypnosis years that I came into contact with Jay Abraham and hired him, Dan Kennedy, these guys. And so, and the best performing ads we had for the hypnosis centers were ads I wrote. And so at towards the end, me making some bad decisions, 9/11, all these kinds of things, I was really struggling every 2 weeks to make payroll. We had over 100 employees. And so I was reading these kind of bullshit ads at the time online about being like an internet, lifestyle millionaire, checking my, stats once an hour, I mean, once a day from the beach. And this thought of me being able to create automated marketing online and not have anybody work for me, where, when I was sweating every 2 weeks to make payroll, was so appealing that I felt like I had a place to go next. So that was another reason. So those are my answers. Cool. Let's see. I love to write when I do it, and maybe I can reflect on things that come to the surface in my mind to be able to reflect on it. Exactly, and that's what I do in my journal writing, Matthew. I generally don't end up writing about what I start writing about. It always goes in places that I never expected. And that's one of the fun parts of doing it, right? At least for me, of writing in my journal. Like I never know where it's going to take me. I'm always It's always easier for me to get access to what I'm really feeling, what I'm really thinking in there than it does just me standing around trying to think it. Um, Rich, would you be willing to show us one of your thinking processes in your journal sometime? Sure, Jane. I'd love to. But I do show in the hidden obstacles a bunch of pages from my journal, so you can definitely take a look at that. But I would be glad to show you some stuff. Not tonight. I think we were going to head back into the city last night. I'm going to actually head into the city tomorrow, so I got a lot of stuff already packed up. So my journal is not in arm's reach right now, but for sure. So, and I still have that other area to go into. So let's press on here first. Uh, Denise, I've created a new hack inspired from your report where I now read books with my journal open, and when something resonates or triggers, I expound on it. I like that and see what comes up. This turns reading into an active reading rather than passive. Thanks, Rich. Now, Denise, what would be interesting is to actually, and I don't want to complicate it, so take it with a grain of salt. But maybe you could tweet like your ideas that came to you from that book, and as a way of creating content, and could be really interesting. A lot of people do these what's called tweet storms, where they'll like the best ideas they got from reading a book or something like that. And I know people get a lot of value from that. But what I do, Denise, is and it's kind of extensive, and I'm actually going to do a video on it because my buddy James is doing some big virtual event, and he asked me if I'd go for like 20 to 30 minutes talking about thinking and learning because my friends closest to me say that my ability to learn is my superpower, and so how do I do it? And so what I do is I use an app called Voice Dream, like DREAM, to go through a book in about an hour to 2 hours while I'm working out. So that has me go through about 3 or 4 books a week. And what that app does is it reads it to you while also showing the words across the screen. Any book that's worthy of me actually highlighting and taking notes on. So like Elon Musk's book wouldn't be, even though it was a very valuable book and I got a lot out of it. I don't need to highlight it, and it's in my head, and I can write about it in my journal. But any book that's nonfiction that I do want to extract a bunch out of, I then read it again. But this time I read it with highlighter, and now I'm highlighting anything that's important to me. Then when I'm done with that, I then export all the highlights, and those highlights go into Evernote in one document. Now that sits there. Then I learned this process from Tiago Fort, where I do something called progressive summarization. So the first time so now what's in Evernote is just everything I highlighted from that book. The first time I read through it, I will, and I don't feel any pressure to do any of this. It's when I'm working on something or when I believe it would be useful to me, or I'm just curious and I want to like explore this area, I will go back to that Evernote note. Actually, I'll show you an example at some point here. And I will bold anything I felt was even more important than just those highlights, right? So now I have this document, and some of it, some of it's bolded. If I go to that document again, I will only look at what was bolded, and I will highlight what's most important of the bolded. And then when I go through it again, I will consolidate all the highlights, and if I go through it again, I now write what I feel and what I think is important on those things that I've highlighted. So in that thing, so yeah, I'll pull up a note at some point here. But I love yours, and I'm not trying to minimize yours. I dig it because ultimately, I also have no problem not finishing a book, Denise, and I don't think anyone should. The purpose of reading a book is to get new ideas, to expose yourself to new information that sparks new ideas, what have you. And so, this is also something that I felt Tiago reminded me of, if didn't teach me, although I did write a report years ago called The Attention Age Doctrine 1, which talked about just-in-time learning. And Tiago talks about how, not to turn learning into a fetish, like not to learn for learning's sake. There's a time and place for that, so I'm not discounting that. But when you are doing anything for the purpose of business or accomplishing something, then you should just consume enough information to do the thing, and not learn for learning's sake, and not make it a fetish to finish a book or something like that, because it's not necessary. But I like the idea, Denise. And Denise also listens at 2 times the speed. I was even reading a book the other night, the the book Driven, ironically, while listening to a podcast, and laughed at the entire situation. Wow, Denise. Sounds like we could be related. Um, Driven. Yeah, that's a great book on ADD. And if it's the I've read 3 different books called Driven, but if it's the most recent one, uh, yeah, you sound. I feel like I found a kindred spirit in you, Denise. I do the same. Uh, Aditya says thanks, excellent quality, cool. Rich. Cool. There we go. Hey, Rich, thank you for the content. I'm really passionate about the travel market, trying to get into it, but right now it's difficult. Do you see any opportunities? I'm a digital marketing consultant, but I am open to doing something different, such as coaching, business or personal, writing on an info product, anything really. Just want to get my feet wet in the market, trying to make ends meet too. Hope you see my dilemma. Um, the what I always try and do is figure out, like, if well, it depends on what your skill sets are, Juan. So, if I have those skills, if that's my passion, right, then it's like, well, what is it that I could do that would create value in that space, right? So, I've never been an overly detail oriented person, or be able to do like crazy things with traffic, like my first mentor, Steven. So, but if I had his skill set, then I would do more in the affiliate side of the travel space, because I'd want to get experience with the market. And by moving traffic and seeing what works, I'd also be learning, and anything I got involved with later, like what I did there would serve me. Right now, if my learning capacity is one of my superpowers, right, then for me, I'd be looking at the travel market and really be, well, where would the ability to learn fast and synthesize a great deal of information be valuable in that market? And for me, it might be where people are like doing research, because my Colby score is a fact finding quick start. And so I lead with information and doing. And so for me, I'd want to find something where providing information of some sort is an advantage, gives me an advantage, because that's what I'm good at. And then I need to think about, where are the information holes in the market, and who would pay to have those holes filled, right? And if I couldn't come at it that way, then I'd say, who are the major players in the market, and what information do they not currently have that they would find valuable? And so, you got to kind of go through a series of questions to kind of come up with the answer. And the answer for you would be different for the answer for me, or for someone else. And that's why I can't give you a specific answer. But what I can tell you is that after you've kind of looked at what it is that you can bring to the table to create value, because at the end of the day, your business, your success, the money that you make will be based on how much value you bring to how many people, right? And how valuable is that value? Then you got to think about, um, what will give you experience, right? What can you do so that when you're done, you know something that you didn't know before, and that allows you to do something that you can't do now. And so, but that comes secondary, in my opinion, to getting clear about what's the easiest way for you specifically to create value. And then that value is a answer to what problems, and who has those problems, or that value is most valuable to what players in the industry, and what do they see as their problems, and what can I do to satisfy those problems? You have to kind of look at it kind of in this overlapping circles kind of thing, you know, like a Venn diagram, but not a Venn diagram because more than just two circles. I hope that helps. If it doesn't, ask me some more questions, Juan. I enjoy helping people. Let's see. Okay, since we last spoke, Rich, early April, I've been live streaming on Facebook to one of my audiences on a weekly basis, even if I don't feel like it. It has been really interesting. I have let my conscious mind get out of the equation, and I have gone with my gut feeling and have shared what's within. I have found that it has been really interesting, both for me and people interacting. Set and stems are great, and I do enjoy the book, The Road Less Stupid. I do write constantly in my book and Evernote on a daily basis, Rich. Thanks for going online twice a week. Wish you all the best. Thank you, Arthur. And yeah, it's a habit. And there are times when I'm like, oh, like, not, where I can think of 20 other things maybe to do with this time. But I am going to master this. I'm going to get really good. And you can witness that. And you can say, I remember when he was a little awkward on video. And I remember when he was testing out stuff, right? Because the only way that I know how to get really good at something is to be willing to do something often enough and reflect on it so that I get better and better and better. And and I wouldn't say that I've dedicated the time that I want to off the lives to improve, but my intention is to, and I will. And right now, I'm like that 2 minute countdown. Really, I think I was sharing this last week. Is really for me to just be clear about what my intention is. Um, so I'm ready to go when that's generally on. But I'm using that time to get clear. Like I want to try and help as many people as I can. I'm doing this to make a difference in people's lives. I want to make sure that that gets across. That I tap into whatever I have to give people what they need. And, that gets kind of played out in my head for 2 minutes as it's related to what we're talking about. And my goal is to come from that place, right? Because I believe that the energy that someone emits is kind of speaks more loudly than what they're saying. Cool. But good for you, Arthur. Thanks for sharing. I wouldn't want that type of client relationship either, and the lack of MRR seems painful. Like each month is a battle to stay profitable. Well, Ulrich, what I will say is that we were insanely profitable because at the end of the day, I was selling programs, and so someone would sign up for, let's say, a 6 month or year-long program or a 9 week program. There would be a certain number of live hypnosis sessions. Those live hypnosis sessions would be with a hypnotist, and we would create them a CD recording back when that wasn't very common of their actual hypnosis session with binaural beats in it, music, it was a whole personalized session based on whatever challenges they were having about getting the outcome they were after. They would also come in though twice a week. So someone who signed up for like a year-long program might have 14 to 16 hypnosis sessions, like with a hypnotist, but they'd also be learning nutrition. And then we had other hypnosis sessions that were pre-recorded that we felt were really important about installing new habits and things like that everyone would benefit from. In addition to that, we had a hypnosis school, and we were the only hypnosis school where you could actually work with clients as interns who had been hypnotized by other people so they could give you really accurate feedback. And so our clients could sign up for free hypnosis sessions with the interns, which, we always had a few interns on staff, so people could get a lot more hypnosis sessions. And our cost per acquisition was about like $400 per client, and the average client was worth $1,800 in initial sale. So we were very profitable upfront, like boom, and so we made a lot of money, a lot of money. It just wasn't the only way that, but every month we only made what we brought in, like, there was any kind of ongoing continuity to it. So, but, uh, you know, writing a report and then having 2,000 coaching clients paying me 5,000 a pop, with no with and it was just me, is a lot more profitable than 100. So we had 60 full-time hypnotists at our peak. Charles Kemp wanted to ask this question since I enjoy smoking cigars as well. How often do you smoke cigars? Do you use them as a reward in your day, or do you pair them with your work routine, journaling, or when in a focus state? It's unwise to attach productive time with an activity like cigar smoking and create a neuroassociation of this sort. Is it unwise? Well, it really for me is I don't smoke as often as I think people think I smoke, although sometimes I do. It really depends on the weather and where I am, and well, not the weather as much. It depends on where I am. So when I used to have my office in Delray, I had my own. There were two buildings, and I had a building in the back of the front building, and that back building was my building. And in that building, I had a library, a gym, and a nice, really cool bathroom. And so in the library, I would smoke cigars, and I had my own, cigar ventilation system and all that kind of stuff. So back then, I would smoke a couple cigars a day, most often, or most, on most days, and I really enjoyed that. When I left that, like when we lived in Manhattan, I hardly ever smoked because I didn't really enjoy going to the cigar bars in Manhattan very often. I enjoyed the ones in Boca and in Delray, but the ones in Manhattan were much smokier. I I'm trying to think. Here in the Hamptons, I will smoke. I smoked one today. I'll smoke it when I do a long phone conversation with someone. Um, but I'm scared of mosquito bites. I get a lot of them. So then I am uh, not crazy about that. When I lived in Boca Raton, I had this whole area that was screened in. So I would smoke most evenings when I was writing in my journal. I don't do that as much here, although because I don't like putting on bug spray and stuff. But yeah, it's very haphazard. The thing is, and maybe it would be very different for me, but I chew nicotine gum, and I've been chewing nicotine gum on and off for about, geez, since college. And turns out that nicotine is a nootropic and actually helps your brain overclock. And so I didn't know that when I started, but I used to chew tobacco in college and figured chewing nicotine gum is a lot healthier. You don't get mouth cancer from these. So I chew nicotine gum pretty much every day, and the only times I don't chew nicotine gum is if I don't have any. Um, but I imagine that I'd probably smoke a lot more cigars if I chewed less nicotine gum. So it's probably that. The first cigar I ever smoked, I was 6 years old, and I have a picture of it. Me and my mom. It used to be up in my office. Com, thanks for sharing. Every time I attend Rich's Facebook Lives, I leave with a bunch of books, apps, and other resources to check out. Love how he opens up his toolbox and shares with us. Rich, do you keep all these tools organized somewhere like Evernote? Um, Not really, but I do like. But what I do is like I do in Evernote. Let's see. Let me see if I can pull it up here, and hopefully nothing overly embarrassing shows up. Um, let's see. All right. Let's see where Evernote is. If I can find it. There we go. Got to move this here. Um, I I keep copies of stuff. This doesn't belong here, does it? No. All right. This is not. This goes to inbox. So hold on. There we go. I do keep copies of presentations I've given. So I'm looking for here. Let's see. I thought I had this in here. I got to find it now. Um, so these are different things that I've taught and worked on. There's a lot more I have in other folders. I thought I had the one I did on biohacking to the copywriters here. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Biohacking copywriter. Yeah, so like this was a presentation. If I can open this, I should be, there we go. All right. And now I can do this. Sorry, guys. There we go. So I was going over a bunch of things like what's my motivation strategy? Because I think everyone has their own unique motivation strategy. And I think part of becoming more effective is figuring out what does get you motivated. So for me, is the opportunity big? Is there an external real deadline? Am I motivated? Is it right for me? Are the stakes high, right? Like kind of working without a net. Would I be letting people down that I care most about, right? This is stuff about sleep, about the tools I use, like Quick Reader, Voice Dream, Brain FM, Fisher Wallace. So there's so that I don't have to consistently go back and rethink about things. So I know when I do the presentation that I'm going to do on how I learn and how I synthesize information, what I'll do is I will find notes like these that I've done in the past, and then that will all go into a Evernote folder that will be labeled for the project that I am currently the Evernote project that will be to create that 30-minute presentation. So I hope that helps. And where are the questions? They're there. All right, let's see. Wow. Okay. Uh, am I referring to a unique mechanism that Todd Brown describes in MFA? I'm not sure which part you're talking about. A unique mechanism. I, yeah, I have always created unique mechanisms. Yeah, so I'm not sure what that's in reference to, but the way I sold theory of constraints to people who didn't know what theory of constraints was, or the way I sold business coaching to people who didn't know that they even needed business coaching, has always been through unique mechanism. And there's an interview, because Todd used to work with me for years. Todd was a client of mine, a friend of mine, a uh, employee slash partner of mine, whatever you want to call it. Now he's, very well established in his own right, and someone I learned quite a bit from. The the There's a really good interview in Todd's Big Idea course, and Andre Chaperone has it in his Sphere of Influence course, where Todd's interviewing me about creating unique mechanisms. And if you've ever seen it, um, if you haven't seen it, you should try and track it down. It's really good. Uh, Denise, we are definitely kindred spirits. I feel like you're talking about me when you talk about how your brain works, hoping my mind can eventually create the success you have. Thanks for all you're doing. My pleasure, Denise. Cool. My Colby score is follow through and fact finder, systematize and explain. Interesting. You're like the peanut butter to my chocolate. Um, I am not high follow through. And everything has its pros and cons, right? Like the high follow through means that you're not highly adaptable. High adaptability means low follow through, right? So there's no good or bad. It's just different ways of operating. What app do I use for live streams? This is Ecamm Live. I played around with Be Live, and that's okay. I kind of like some more of these tools, and so that's what we're using right now, Ecamm Live. I think it's really cool to be able to use other cameras. Ecamm Live pulls in my Canon, so I'm just using my regular Canon camera that I used for years to shoot videos, but I can also uh, plug in other things, which, like, if I wanted to, I could start using this, my cell phone as well, and give you another angle, right? You could see like my elliptical machine and all the other crap that I have here, but Kim would probably beat me up, so we won't do that. But I like Ecamm Live quite a bit. I should probably get an affiliate link for them at some point because I really do recommend them quite often. I feel that energy you are emitting and making a difference in my life. I'm grateful for what you're doing for us. Cool. And I appreciate you saying that. Appreciate the general framework. My problem has been finding a specific opportunity in the travel market right now where things are pretty much paralyzed. So if you have any ideas or approaches, would be helpful. If not, I will continue my research. Well, you know, I would say, right, that like definitely, I would imagine that, and I definitely wouldn't pretend to know the travel market that well, but I would say that RVs, right? Like, the campers. I don't know if you're in the U.S. Maybe you're in Mexico. But in the U.S., campers are a big thing. I would imagine more people are going to use campers. I noticed that when I booked my train ticket, because I'm going to go to Baltimore on Monday. So next Tuesday, I'll actually be broadcasting live from Agora's offices. Um, the ticket was very, very cheap, right? Because most people are still kind of weirded out by coronavirus. But definitely, like, campers allow you to travel and do a lot of things without having to go to airports, be around a lot of people. So there's something there. There's potentially. I mean, you got to start using. I would start reading like clever ways to travel now, the new vacation, like stuff like that, to see if you come across stuff that kind of gets your brain thinking. I most of the most of the good ideas I've had, um, almost all the good ideas I've had, did not come from me just coming out of the blue with something. It came off of me pushing off of something, seeing something, and my brain taking me someplace else. So for me, it's always research based. And as I'm thinking about this, yeah, if I'm in your shoes, I'm looking for, blog posts from the periphery of like cool trips you could take right now, or safe ways to travel with your whole family, or things like that that would give me ideas. But then I'd still kind of go through that process that I told you about. Good morning, Rich. Well, Jolene, where are you that it's morning? Because it's evening here. It's 7:45 p.m. Cool. Thanks for taking us into Evernote. That certainly was helpful. Yeah, I would love to show you actually a progressive summarization one too, because I think that you would get a kick out of that and you'd see how valuable it is. So let's see if I can find a progressive summarization one that would be interesting. All right, so yeah, let me show you this because I think you guys will get a kick out of this, and I think like, oops, that's not the one I want to show you. This is what I want to show you. And this is not, I don't think this one's complete, but let's see. All right, so as I mentioned, big fan of Tiago Fort. This was a book he wrote that he didn't release. He's now writing a book that's going to be released with a big publisher. But I was fortunate enough that he sent me a copy and asked me my opinion. So you can see Rich Sheffrin's wisdom notes. These are like, after I've consumed a book numerous times, or I plan on consuming one, I will actually go to this level of depth. You can see here that like these things are empty right now because I haven't finished it yet, right? So it's like summarize the book in a tweet. So if I ever wanted to tweet about it, what are my top 3 takeaways? Who's the intended audience? How am I satisfied with it overall? Difficult and complexity, top 3 positive points, top 3 negative points, most important concepts. Then I have these generic my thoughts, right? Which you'll see in a second. So page 7. Now this was what I highlighted from that page, right? So we carry within us the wonders we seek without us. Economic development is based on the ability of not on the ability of a pocket of the economy to consume, but on the ability of people to turn their dreams into reality. Cesar Hidalgo, Why Information Grows. This is a book about turning your ideas into reality. This book is for people who want to make a difference in these areas by making something. It is for the creators of the world, right? In the information age, we deal mostly with infrastructure, tools and managing information. Information is not the raw material of much of our daily reality. How you consume and manage the information flowing through your life, from books and articles to emails and text messages to project plans and reference materials, is now one of the most decisive elements in your effectiveness. Right? My thoughts. Right? So this is I'm now interacting with the book. Information is now the raw material of much of our daily reality. How you consume and manage the information flowing through your life is now one of the most decisive elements in your effectiveness. So, this is me writing just to myself, really. It's a profound thought. It's less about what you're exposed to than what is seen. Parentheses distinction, that's something that I think you guys have heard me talk about. What is captured in Evernote, what is processed, build a second brain, and what is found when it's time to create. And unfortunately, it's not intuitive, and it's not something most people are knowledgeable enough to create their own systems to start with. It's an entirely new way of working. It's not just different or slightly better, and therefore requires a shift in a new perspective from the way you see your work and how you do your work to using your curiosities and what fascinates you to guide you on everything from the content it should be you do consume, not to consume, you do consume to the outputs you create in your job, business, and overall life. So that's an example, right? And so, like, here's another little like piece that I bolded. Here's my thought here, right? Here's bolded. Here's some bolds and highlights. Here's my thoughts about this. Right now, I don't want to pretend like I do this for most books because I don't, right? Like I said, I read 3 books a week. I can read a book so much faster than I can read 10 books faster than I can do this for 1 book. But for the books that I find really meaningful to me, that I want to make sure it like I find them profound enough that I want to not only um, remember it, but I want to incorporate it into who I am and my thinking. I will then do that. Um, and so that's where Evernote really becomes valuable to me for those things. And then connecting those notes to other notes becomes like this labyrinth of the best thoughts I've ever come across. My thoughts about those best thoughts, where I see that applying, and then that opens up a trove of things to talk about, things to teach on, things to create, etc. So my pleasure, though, Marcus. Uh, yep. I like Colby because it's not tagging anything as good or bad. It shows traits on the spectrum. Yep, I agree. I'm probably what I'm the biggest fan of is the Enneagram, um, and only because I find it so accurate. And also, what I like about the Enneagram is that it tells you when you're trending towards your best as well as trending towards your worst. So I'm a 4. A 4 it, like aspires to and moves towards structure and systems, which is a number 1. So the more structured and systematic I am, it would make sense that I teach that or have taught that because I see like that's where I'm at my best. Whereas when I'm at my worst, I think I'm on number 7, I don't remember. And so like as those characteristics become more pronounced, it means I'm actually heading in the wrong direction in my life. So I like that it has like the personality element. It also helps me be a witness to the patterns that I need to kind of be exposed to, like my mood dominating my world, thinking that I'm missing something, thinking I have some kind of fatal flaw. Like it's the Enneagram 4. Um, so I like the Enneagram. For those of you who've never seen it, it's worth checking out. Um, Love Steal Our Winners. Love seeing you do lives. Thanks, but you didn't tell us where you're from, Jolene, that you said good morning. In a world of clutter, fog, and crap, I love you being you and sharing your thoughts and wisdom. Thanks for it's my pleasure, man. I would focus on road trips, camping, and state parks. That's what I think, Teresa. I think that would be a good place to start. Juan, awesome. Thank you, Rich. Charles Kemp. Uh, Thanks for sharing. Would be fun to see that 6-year-old photo of you smoking your first cigar sometime. I'll put it up sometime. Also, you mentioned that you were working on optimizing your sleep. What is the current sleep regimen composed of? How do you design your sleep environment to ensure better sleep? Do you use your Aura Ring to measure your sleep data? Yes, I use my Aura Ring to measure my sleep data. And I've been doing my best, except we had something come up last night that kind of threw things for a whack. But for the last couple of weeks, I've been going to bed earlier than I normally have. But what's probably made the biggest difference for me, I think, is I've always taken a lot of magnesium, which I have to because when I work out, I sweat a lot. When I drink a ridiculous amount of fluids all day long. Um, so magnesium's always been really good for me. But when you take a lot of magnesium, you need to take magnesium glycinate because a lot of the other magnesiums have like a an effect on the stomach, right? So, and I just ran out of magnesium like the last day or two ago. But then I was able to. I'm waiting for Amazon to finally deliver. But the game changer for me has been L-tryptophan, and L-tryptophan I take 3 grams of it at night. It's just an amino acid, but it's the same amino acid that's in turkey that makes you sleepy. And I found for me that that's been knocking me out. And I sleep on a chili pad. I've done that for the last couple of years, but and I do expose myself to bright light every morning as quickly as I can. I I do find that the earlier I exercise, the better, the lower my heart rate drops. But I've definitely been getting some of the best sleep that I've gotten in a long time for the last couple of weeks, and it's been making a huge difference. I'm happier. I'm more productive. I'm definitely thinking better. I also gave up smoking pot a couple months ago, and I think that that's made a difference. Uh, Not that I was ever like smoking all the time, but I would smoke at night sometimes, and that I thought was helping me sleep. And now looking at my sleep measurements, it actually was I'm getting much better sleep now. I'm trying to think what else. I don't really drink, so I mean I'll have a drink now and then, but I'm not a big drinker, so and that's always, although sometimes I when I do have a drink, I have some of my best night's sleep, even according to my Aura ring. Like I'll have lots of stage 4 and stage 3 sleep. Um, yeah, well, and I'm big on biohacking. I'm huge on biohacking, and so I'm really trying to do my best to be as healthy as possible. Um, and mental health is probably the most important of that. And I think, you know, I just think that my generation is either going to be the last one to die young or the first one to die older. And I don't know which it's going to be, but if we're going to live longer because of what advances come, I want to be there for it. And I definitely feel physically like at some of my best. I'm in ketosis pretty much consistently. That's where I like to be. And my body just seems to run better on ketones than it does sugar. Figured that out in my 20s. So I don't know if that helps. But also being in ketosis probably has been helping my sleep too. Been much more religious about that. Ah, one of Katrina Ruth's ninja babes. Got it, Jolene. So yes, it would be morning for you. And then you're up. What is it? Is it 10 o'clock in the morning there or 6 o'clock in the morning? I always get confused if you're 2 hours earlier or 2 hours later. I mean, you're 14 or whatever, but Jeremy, hi Rich, hope you're well. How do you keep track of all your goals, projects, next actions, notes, big ideas, etc.? How do you decide what to do next? Do you still use getting things done or something else? Um, yeah, I use this kind of getting things done format. I do, you know, I have to reevaluate my goals and my thinking about goals. Because when I think it's time for me to reevaluate some of my thinking about goals. I'll share with you my latest thinking on goals, but that's from a bunch of years ago. And I don't know that up until a couple weeks ago, I would have 100% agreed with it. Now I'm like maybe 80%. So, one of the things that sparked my midlife crisis in my early 40s, right, was that I had achieved everything I had wanted to achieve and I was not happy. And that made me question, like, what's the purpose of all this? Like, why did I do all this? And and so then I had like, I thought when I achieved all these goals, I'd be happy, and I wasn't. And so then I thought, well, okay, so there's no reason for goals, and that didn't really help me too much either. In fact, that took me backwards. But then I kind of thought about, because I kept asking myself, well, what is it do I want? And I said, I don't know what I want. What do I want? Well, I don't know what I want. Um, and finally, I was like, I want to feel alive. Like I just want to feel alive. I want to be engaged in life. Like I don't. That's all I really want. And then from there, what I realized is that anytime I was pursuing something, I felt alive. I felt purposeful. I felt like there was a reason to my day and to me. And so from there, I went to the only reason then to have a goal is for that. If a goal gets me out of bed in the morning, that's the only thing it needs to do because I feel best when I'm in pursuit. So, like, kind of like if you can imagine that human beings were predators and, not necessarily chasing other human beings, but as an animal, we're predators. And so we're meant to be in pursuit. And so for me, the only purpose of a goal is to stimulate being engaged in life. And as long as I'm engaged in life, I will bump into things that I find interesting. I will meet interesting people. I will do interesting things. But most importantly, I will be in motion and I will be engaged in life. And so I haven't had any big goals for a long time because that big goals that I was in pursuit of felt more like a disappointment than smaller goals that of something to do, figure out today, or something to get done today. Um, so I wouldn't, but I don't pretend to be an efficient machine by any stretch of the imagination. I think that I I have a lot of growth still to do in that area. I can work like a madman with crazy focus when need be, but more often than not, it doesn't need to be, and therefore I'm not. Um, and I have a challenge at times figuring out how much I should budget time for things. So I'd say that yeah, I still believe in making lists. I believe in keeping those lists kind of context specific, and but more and more, Evernote seems to be the place for me where a lot of my thinking goes and where my processing happens. And especially, I guess, right now, like because of the lockdown, there hasn't been much travel or anything like that. But like I said, I'm going to the city this weekend, spending the weekend with my oldest daughter, who I haven't seen since March because she wanted to stay in Manhattan um, because her boyfriend's there. And so I'm going to spend the weekend with her. And then I'm going to Baltimore to spend some time with my Agora peeps, with Matt, with Joe Schriefer, with Pete Coyne, Katie, and maybe I'll even convince Uvaldo to come up from Florida, but I don't know if that's going to happen. Anyway, I'm over. So I'm going to end here. Thank you all for coming. Next week, I didn't even get to the second tool, so I'll do that next week. I'll do that from the Agora offices. Um, Love to know from you guys, what do you think is the best, like as someone who was watching this, what's the right amount of content I deliver versus questions that I should answer? I'm just curious, like, because I'm going into these and I'm wondering, like, should I blitz for a half an hour, just straight content, and then open up the questions for the last hour and a half? Should I do 15 minutes of content, then 45 minutes of questions, and then another 15 minutes of content? Should I do 15 minutes of content, then some questions, then 15 minutes of content, then some questions, and like kind of like that? Curious what your thoughts are. I'd love it if you could answer that before we end this, and it would be really useful for me because I really want to figure out what I think is the right structure. I don't really want to turn this into a show where I have segments like, you know, tip of the week or tool of the day. I don't think I want to do stuff like that. I mean, tell me if you think that would make it more interesting. But I definitely, my fear is this, is that if when I go on answering questions too long, it could get boring to some people. Maybe it's not, maybe I'm wrong, but I'd love to know that. And so if you guys could share that, I do review all the questions afterwards to make sure that there's not anything open, and I will definitely be reviewing this. Remember, thumbs up, heart, share, whatever makes it more likely for Facebook to spread it organically. And we've had some of these that have now gotten viewed like close to 100,000 times, which is pretty cool. So I hope everyone has a phenomenal weekend. I've got some videos to record for Matt so that so tomorrow he does end at 5 p.m. Happy. And once again, I just appreciate each and every one of you for being here, for asking questions, for commenting, for engaging, for listening. Uh, what else can I say? But thank you, and I hope that I provided you guys value. And I'm always looking for other things to cover. So if there's anything you guys want me to cover, if you want me to spend an hour one day, like going through my Evernote and showing you different things, great. If you want me to show you how I write reports, fine. If you want to know like what I did in the retail business and what did I do in that to make it successful, ask me. I'm a pretty open book. So I'm here to help you guys. And, sometimes it was, well, I'll end with this. It was much easier for me to know what people needed when, back in 2004, because there was like 1 year or 2 years I was out ahead of the people I was talking to. And my life a year before then was like their life. But nowadays it's not so much like that, and so it's not as clear to me. I don't believe that all the problems that I struggle with are the same problems that you struggle with. um, they're just different. And so knowing what it is I can share with you that would make the difference, I have my own ideas about some of those things, and that's what I'm sharing. I definitely want to get back to mental maps at some point because I do think that they're so powerful. I'm going to do some more research into uh, Elon Musk's starting with first principles because I do want to understand that better, and I have gobs of respect for him, especially after reading the biography. So, with all that said, to higher profits and beyond, thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for thumbs up. And I will see everyone on Tuesday at 2 p.m. from Baltimore, from Agora headquarters. Till then, bye bye.